Welcome to episode 2 of Range Days. We're talking all about the Cobra King F9 Speedback driver that you guys have been waiting for. Let's head to Dan in the Bay to get some swings and some data.
All right, Josh, we're back. We've seen quite a few shots taken with Cobra F9 Speedback. A really interesting transition for me as we were running through Range Days as a whole, and certainly unique in both sound and I think speed as well. I'm going to take down the showdown image, and we have 10 shots showing here right now. We actually did 5 with a standard, like a traditional 9-degree head, and then
9-degree head.
5 with the 12.5 degree head. Just out of curiosity, see the big differences between the two. Give me your early thoughts here, Josh.
Well, the first thing was what we kind of expected, which was the speed came down a little bit with the higher lofted head, but not a lot. The efficiency stayed strong, and overall, when you're looking at what we saw here, this was a driver that was both dynamic in speed, in forgiveness, and everything else, and we can break that down a little further and talk about the tech as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to go from here. The one thing I noticed between this driver and really most of the drivers I've hit was how quickly I could send it through the zone. I saw some really impressive swing speed numbers. So I'm going to kick it to an image which you can see on the toe of the driver. You got the word aero. So obviously Cobra's got something going on this year that's making it a little bit unique. So maybe you could give us an idea of really what's going into the aerodynamics of this head.
I can. So, for the last 10 years, we've always heard longer, faster, better, faster being the king, and no pun intended there, and talking about speed. In this case, the aerodynamic story, I think when people first heard it, it was not a lot of, wow, I can't wait to try this, because it didn't have that buzzworthy term. But when they finally started getting feedback on it, when they finally saw it, they finally started seeing all the things that went into it, it makes a lot of sense. We're talking about the first driver that Cobra's ever made that is both very low CG and super aerodynamic. And to do that, they had to create something that's a little different looking. When you first picked it up, and you were with me with that first meeting at their headquarters in Carlsbad, what did you think?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. We've obviously seen a handful of iterations in the F series from them. Through the whole presentation, I love the comparison to fast cars, fast profiles, which obviously presents the yellow and red. The one thing that kind of latched on really hard is this wrapped carbon crown. Something I don't think is being replicated too many other places, if I'm not correct.
No, you are correct. So by wrapping the crown around the you actually save way. Metal, carbon fiber, composite materials, whatever a company is using, is on the crown, on the surface, whether that's a cutout with a hole in it, so to speak, and then glued together. I'm using general terms here. This one wraps a little further than that, and by doing that, again, all about saving weight. And if you ever get a chance to spend some time with the folks at Cobra, they talk a lot about saving weight, and every gram matters, and being able to reposition that weight low and further back. And if they're looking at this image, they will see what they've done is, in the right side of the image, which is take that low CG speedback weighting, and it almost, when you first pick it up and you haven't seen anything like it, or in our case, we hadn't even seen pictures of it yet, it almost looked like it was a cartridge. Not the case, obviously, just low weighting, but by doing so and not having it somewhere in the middle of the driver, or even just using like a tungsten weight straight in the back like we've seen in the past from other companies, they've been able to keep the aerodynamics, which increases speed, increased speed means more distance, more ball speed, and everything across the way. Now, they haven't stopped there. The leading edges, both the crown and the sole, are softer. That's not something that you will notice, but if you pick two driver heads, if you go to the store, any of our watchers, viewers go to the store and they pick up two driver head and they look at this driver head and another driver head, you will see a very big difference between the leading edges and how much softer they are here. They have the raised tail, they have the speed trips throughout. It's all about speed and making it faster. And they have some pretty big time aerodynamics people there, and a lot of companies do. But Mike Yagley, whose specialty is in aerodynamics, came from Boeing, and when I started talking to him about this driver a couple of years ago, or at least last year, and he wouldn't talk really about specifics yet. He just said, we have something coming that makes me smile when it comes to talking about aerodynamics. And that's something that you don't normally hear out of R&D people. It's not really, they're not talking about buzzwords and things like that, but you could hear it in his voice. And I know he shared it with some of the people, the participants that were in the THP event, just talking about speed in general and how for a long time it's been thought of it being maxed out, and that's really just not the case.
Yeah, it's I really got a sense of excitement out of them. Obviously, you and I had traveled to Cobra headquarters late last year, and it was really encouraging hearing them speak so highly of their product. And you did mention, and I'm switching images on you, you did mention going head to head in a store and looking at some of the differences between other drivers. But I think probably the most obvious difference would be the CNC milled face. Not new to Cobra products, but maybe new to some people. Why don't you give us a little insight on what makes this so unique for Cobra?
The first thing that stands out is visual technology, obviously. Like you said, you go to the store, it looks different than everything else. A lot of people last year when they came out, and I'll be the person who says I think Cobra did the best job of explaining what the milled face did. The milled face is one part performance, one part the best way to describe it is consistency. Most driver heads are hand polished as far as the face goes, and most driver heads either use an insert, so to speak, that's welded around the perimeter, or they use a face cup design. Very few use a face cup design in the drive. It's not as necessary, some people believe, based on where the normal shots go. What Cobra decided to do was take a step further in the precision and add CNC milling, and by doing that, you take the human error out of play for the most part. And that leads to you could argue, hotter face, but it definitely leads to more consistency. In fact, I would make the case 30% or so are the numbers being thrown around. So more consistency means that Ricky Fowler, Bryson DeChambeau, Lexi versus you and I versus anybody else who walks in the store are going to get the same driver. It also means that they can go thinner in spots and more precise, like we were talking about earlier. That's something that no matter what else comes out from another company can't be done this way or isn't being done this way. And consistency at the end of the day is king. Everybody's picked up a driver in a store and fallen in love with it, and then they get their driver and it feels or sounds slightly different. Now, a lot of times that's our head in our own way. We get that a lot. That's part of the game of golf. In this case, you are eliminating that one thought. Real, fake, placebo, whatever you are eliminating the one thought that this driver head or face is different than the one I tried in the store.
Yeah,
it's not.
What a great segue for us, because as range days goes, we spend time in the bay, hitting shots, and then we bring this tech or bring this information back to the community as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and just segue straight into my first best shots. We got two best shots, two worst shots with Cobra F9 to really get some idea what's going on with the head. As you can see, Josh, my swing speed is looking really good here at 115. My accuracy on the face is really good here. I found Cobra F9 to be a very, very easy club to find the middle of the face with, at least audibly. I felt like I was hitting really strong quality shots each time. What about this stands out to you? Obviously, I'm on the button. Obviously, things are working out. What do you see here that appeals to you?
Two things stand out, and before we jump right into this shot, I want to do a for days, and your club head speed with this driver, it wasn't hit at the end, it wasn't hit smack dab in the middle, it wasn't hit at the beginning. was approximately 1 mile an hour faster with this driver than the other drivers. That's indisputable. This is for you. There were a couple where you got up into some high speeds, but for the average across the board, and we don't really deal with a lot of averages here for a reason, you were faster with this head, which told me that maybe this thing was working. Especially because if people watched our first video, it's not the longest shaft, which would then create that. But faster club head speed, incredible efficiency. For those that follow this, 1.43 is really solid. You know, the GC Quad, TrackMan, FlightScope, they all register things a little differently. 1.45, 1.46 is really pretty ideal with a quad. Carry was just fantastic. You got it slightly low, which if people watched our first episode, we'll see a little elevation and spin and a little lower launch, which we saw there, but nothing changed. Fast, straight. I mean, this was a fantastic golf shot.
Yeah, and the one thing we should make note of, as we have in every Range Days episode we've done, including the live stream, we use stock inline shafts that are available to all consumers. I believe we use the Aldila NV Green.
Yes.
Stiff, 65 grams for this. I'm a higher speed guy. I'm, probably more in that X Flex range. So this is a fairly typical number for me to see for a mid spin head. I wouldn't consider this a low spin head. I wouldn't consider it a high spin head. What do you think in terms of kind of putting an actual category for the spin of F9?
I'm not a category guy, and the reason why it will play a role here. Now, one thing that does really well with their MyFly adapter is you can change the loft, changing face angle, so that part is nice. Let me just say this. I don't think anybody who's concerned with spin should be concerned with the F9. You can get fit for this with no problems and dial in just about any parameter for just about any golfer.
That's good thoughts. And I was going to kind of use that to segue a little bit later. So let's hold on to that thought and maybe kick it over to my second best shot. We'll have a chat about that. But once again, fairly close to the center of the head, maintaining a lot of that efficiency we saw, a little bit weaker overall. Dynamic loft is actually quite a bit lower and carries about the same. What do you see here?
Well, it goes back to slightly high, little loss of speed, little loss of spin, but the dynamic loft being low really kept efficiency up, which was nice. I will say that most of the viewers, myself included, look at this and you're like a little bigger miss, 2 millimeters one side, 1 millimeter high. They probably hate you right about that.
Well, the one thing, Josh, I noticed probably getting more incorporated into some of the spin here was I actually did have a bit of a larger path out to in, which was creating a fair bit of side spin. And when you add those numbers into the overall spin profile, I might be exaggerating a little bit if I were to improve my path overall, seeing a little bit better numbers there, which would really kick up that carry number.
It would. Considerably more than people think.
Yeah, and before I go into the worst shots, because we are inevitably going to talk about those, and they are there, we also hit this with my gamer shaft and produced not only some of the fastest speeds I've seen in a long time, short of swinging a 46 or 47-inch driver head, we also saw some of the best ball speeds I've ever seen, which is worth noting. I think, obviously getting a fit is a very important thing, but it's all within range here. So
yes, and you saw what was interesting about when you switched to your regular shaft. It wasn't going through a fitting. It was just like, hey, let me plug my regular shaft in because I'm intrigued by this.
Yeah.
No difference when you picked it up. It didn't take any time to adjust. It didn't change any. It didn't normally, like we said in previous episodes, you might have to swing once or twice to get the weight down. No adjustment at all. Pick it up and go.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on my final thoughts on sound and the sound quality. So let's go ahead and just kick it right into my first worst shot. And before we get into this and the next one, we actually have one on each side of the head. So it'd be a nice opportunity to talk about this. Josh, one thing I want to focus on here, and I really want to get your thoughts. We're 12 millimeters on the toe side of this, but our efficiency is basically neutral. on
Yes.
some of the efficiencies we've seen on my best shots. Is that a telling factor to the swing, or is that a combination of swing and club? What do you see here?
Both. I think, to me personally, there's a lot of technology. We constantly hear that drivers don't change year to year. This is a perfect example of how much they do change. Cobra has a lot of face technology they use. They don't talk about it a ton, at least as far as I'm concerned. Dual roll is one of them, and I know you can kind of jump into this a little bit, where bulge and roll has changed. We've seen some companies market theirs a little differently. TaylorMade did with their twist face. Dual roll's actually been around a little before that, where the change of bulge and roll is pretty significant, and what it's done is it's helped misses laterally and top to bottom, but to me a little more lateral than top to bottom. And I think what you're going to find as we look through Dan's bad shots, so to speak, is that they've kind of perfected this. And when you start missing laterally towards the heel and toe, and in our testing, especially toe side, if you're a toe side miss person, you've got to try this driver out, because over all the shots that I've hit during this, with Dan, without Dan, just this past weekend with some golfers with more moderate swing speeds, the toe side miss held up to efficiency better than any driver I've tested so far this year with them, which isn't all of them, but it's a lot of them.
Yeah, and this did, while I did still have that out to in path and actually a face close to target, I still managed to hit a pretty similar fade to what I was seeing overall with the head, which I think is fairly typical with a 9-degree. I usually kick mine up a little bit, close the face. So this is exactly what I wanted to see. Let's move into the second worst shot, and this actually goes to the heel side of center. So now we're looking at 8 millimeters on the heel, a little bit low. Now, traditionally speaking, Josh, this is like spin factory, spin central for me.
Yes, for most people.
For most people, yet we're only at 3,300. Again, totally neutral profile, inline, stock shaft, stiff shaft, and the efficiency, Josh, is as good as when I hit it on the button. How is that possible?
Yes. Well, two things make it possible a little bit. The first is, as you go a little low, speed goes up. But what we saw here is not only did speed go up, normally launch goes way down, and it didn't here, which means you might get a little more spin, you're going to get more speed, but your launch angle stayed in a respectable spot, giving you, an efficiency that's borderline insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, 265 carry on a miss that severe, and I know it doesn't sound severe to a lot of viewers. It actually is a pretty big miss. 8 millimeters doesn't sound big, but it really is a pretty good size miss. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
and
when you're
trying walked away there saying, "Wow."
Yeah, I did for a number of these shots have a smile on my face, which is always good to see. I'm gonna get rid of this screen. I'm gonna go straight back to the 5 and 5 as we kind of start wrapping up. We did do 12.5 versus 9-degree. I thought we were going to see a little bit of a versus here, but I think we got exactly what we thought. We saw a little bit less ball speed, probably the added launch. We saw a significant increase in launch angle.
Which they're seeing there, and with that goes obviously a significant increase in backspin.
Yeah, and spin and carries exactly what you'd expect it to be. So I think that's pretty telling. One thing that I thought was interesting, Josh, is they flighted higher, but they also didn't go as far right. Do you think 9-degree heads versus 12.5-degree heads are going to see a little bit of a difference in tendency?
Well, not always. In this case, yes, but that is partly because the 9-degree and 12-degree heads are different. And I'm going to be honest and say Cobra explains this extremely well on their website, and it's probably better to read it than it is to have me explain it. But since we're here, and clearly I like to hear myself talk, the 9-degree head took the place of the previous year's plus models in some ways. So what was a little confusing in the past for some golfers, they'd walk in, they'd see F8, F8 plus. Well, does plus mean better? Does it mean better player? Does it mean lower spin? In a lot of cases, yes to all those. In a lot of cases, not yes to those, or no. So in this case, as you go lower in loft, our producer's laughing at me here. as you go lower in loft, you're going to see a kind of a different driver, and not just the penetrating flight you expect to see out of a lower loft, but a different club head. And I think that's something worth noting that people should test out for themselves, or at least make sure they get fit for, because you are going to see a different scenario possibly from taking a 9-degree head and raising the loft than you would from taking a 10.5-degree head and playing it as is.
That's great thoughts. I'm going to shut this image down. We now have the standard range days image up with the F9 driver as we wrap up our thoughts, Josh. I want to hear...
on the red carpet.
It is 100% on the red carpet. I want to hear your thoughts. You were forced to watch me hit this driver over and over and over again. I think that it might be one of my favorite sounding drivers right now. I think it's incredibly appealing. It is very responsive, both on and off the middle of the face. And really and truly, it made me feel like when I was making good contact, I was really receiving solid praise from the head. What did you think?
I said it last year, and I'll say it again this year, that I think they nailed the sound as much as any company out there. I like a little something that's a little metallic. There's not really a whole lot of that, but it's not that. I don't want to say composite-y sound because I created that word just now, but it's not a dead sounding driver. And I have a thought to it that is probably makes no sense at all, but I'm going to run with it anyway. Would you like to hear it?
Absolutely.
Because I've never shared this with Dan or anybody else. We talk about putters and how they feel soft. And I'm going to take insert out of the putters out of the... We talk about milled putters and how they feel soft. And if you have a really aggressive milling pattern on the face, it feels a little softer, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Wouldn't this be the same case with a driver?
That is an interesting take.
That the audible tone is a softer sound because the surface area based on the milling is technically less than. To me, that makes sense.
You took this a lot further than I thought you would, and I kind of like it. It might create some interesting conversation in the comments below, maybe even the THP forum.
There's some madness going on up here, I tell you.
Well, let me segue that into probably one of the most controversial questions to you when we talk about F9, and that is, there are actually two models that you can pick from this year. There's a yellow model with, I guess you'd have like a glossy... Speed yellow, yeah. With like a glossy top. And then there's what's called an avalanche, which basically replaces the yellow with the white with more of a matte finish on the top. It's had a few different terms used to describe it. I want to know, and it sounds like you've already made your decision, but are you team yellow or are you team avalanche?
No, team yellow by a lot. Look at those tour players; they're all rocking the yellow. At the PGA show, and I'm really hopeful we can get this. We have an event coming up with some participants getting to play with somebody from Cobra. I hope we can get this on camera with them describing the two colors. It's NSFW. Did I get those right?
Yep.
Yeah, I did. But there it is. I'm just glad they give choices. I think choices are good. Some companies offer custom choices. Here, there's a couple of choices for people. I think at the end of the day, that's the most important.
Yeah, and I think it's funny.
And yellow is the better one.
I am passionately on Team Avalanche. I would love to hear in the comments what you guys think. What is your preference in the driver head?
I'm going to also share a story on why Dan's Team Avalanche. He's also the person that goes to Dairy Queen and gets a cone of vanilla.
Okay.
That's true.
Vanilla ice cream is delicious. Josh, any final thoughts on what you've seen here today and what we saw in the Bay previously on Cobra F9?
No, it lived up to the hype, which is not always the case. And, we're just excited to be able to break down every one of these drivers for you, and then some, and more clubs to come. But it lived up to the hype in both the tech, in the story, in the tour players who were on fire with it, we should add. Backed it up with you as a golfer who's a scratch golfer or better. Every golfer we've put it in the hands of. The feedback on the online community has been amazing. It's just a really solid product that we think people should check out.
Yeah. Very fast, very impressive, quality sounds. I came away really impressed. I would love to hear what you guys think. I hope you guys take a chance to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Range days will continue. It's all down below. Yeah. Oh, down here. We also have a great conversation going on in the THP community. If you guys want to join in, www.thehackersparadise.com. Looking forward to seeing some community feedback as well on the Cobra F9. Josh, thanks for your time today. It's always a blast doing range days with you, and we'll have more information and more episodes coming up soon.